Coach, let's start off with kind of a general kind of overarching thought of the season. Obviously, there were ups and downs as every hockey season has, but when you look back at the year that was for the Stockton Heat, what do you make of it?
That's a good question. I think there's still a little bit of, you know, not really feeling comfortable with where we're at right now. When we were that close, you have one game to get yourself in, and things would have bounced our way with the game we needed in Tucson. It's tough to swallow, and I think you go back and look over the course of the year at a few of the games that maybe there was something that we could have done differently earlier in the year to allow us to get one or two extra wins early on. And that's where the challenge comes in when you're reflecting back and you try to figure out things that went wrong and what we could have maybe done differently. But I think with our group here this year, there were a lot of positives again as well, both in regards to how our team played, but also in regards to some of the individual performances that we saw from a lot of players, including people that got called up to Calgary and were guys that contributed really well for that team there. And that's something that's very important for our group down here when we see our players go up and have some success.
So it's it's a tough thing to think going back so long ago that 1 point lost here and there affected things in April, and obviously we know how it played out. But is it hard to kind of is it difficult to kind of think that way because it's hockey, things happen.
I think when you evaluate like we are in the last couple of days, I think it's natural to think that way. I mean, it's foolish to think that there's anything we can do about it now, but if we can learn some lessons from certain situations moving on to next year, whether that's how we play overtime earlier in the season, our shootout choices, decisions on who we started in net some games, maybe pushing the team in a little different direction at a certain point in the season, all those little things come into play. And I think this is the time of the year when you have to go back and try to figure out what went wrong and try to find some solutions to the areas that you're going to come up with and look to be better for it next year.
The fact is though that a lot of this season you were playing without some of your best players. You touched on the call-ups obviously, but there were some injuries as well, both in Calgary and here, losing some significant pieces at different times in the season, and sometimes all at once. It seemed like when you look at though the guys that had to step up in those situations, do you feel like you saw enough from those guys?
There were some real good improvements from a lot of our players, and the guy that comes to the top of my mind when you mentioned that was Brett Pollock. I mean, there's a guy at the beginning of the year that was in and out of the lineup, and when he was in the lineup, he wasn't playing a significant role. But by the end of the year, he was probably in top three in regards to our minutes played. He was playing in every situation, and he became a really important guy for our team here. So that was opportunity for him. Now it's up to him what he does with it moving forward. So there's situations like that for sure. But every team in the American League goes through stretches where they lose some really good hockey players. There's injuries in every team. They have to deal with that stuff. And for us, the disappointing part is the games that you want your guys to play, the meaningful games, the ones that are coming up starting this weekend. We didn't get a chance to have our guys play in those games. And that's something that we are disappointed with. And we have to find a way to get the development side the way it was this year where our guys are moving up and contributing, but we also have to make sure we have a standard for our players in regards to each day, making sure we have a real good understanding that every day matters.
You're talking to the players yesterday. A lot of them had a lot of positive things to say about the leadership group this year, and I think that's normal. I think every year we've had, everyone always talks about how great the leadership group was, but having someone in the quality of person that Rod is, having someone like Luke Gazdic with such experience, Dalton Prout, who may not necessarily be wearing an A on his chest, but brings that experience, Tyler Wotherspoon, a young veteran. It seemed like you had a lot of voices in there that were widely respected by the guys in the dressing room, and they were guys that took the loss yesterday, I think, a little bit harder.
Yeah, they did, and that's because they're elite guys. Our leadership group this year was terrific, easy to work with. They cared about the people that they were in the dressing room with, and they tried to do things the right way to set the right example, and that starts with Rod. I think that's first and foremost. He is one guy that came in as advertised. We did some homework on him. Of course, you have to try to find some information and do your fact finding on some of your players that have to fill key roles, and everything that we were told about him was exactly true. So what he brought to our room, how he competed on the ice, the example that he set, was terrific in regards to the standard that we wanted him to bring here. Luke Gazdic was another guy that you touched on. He's more of the emotional leader of our team, I guess you can say, and another older player that found a way to bring everybody together. And I think sometimes that can be a challenge when you have some older guys, some younger guys. But in Luke's situation, he seemed to be one of our glue guys around the dressing room. But that entire leadership group that we had this year, you mentioned Dalton Prout, there's Cody Goluboof, Tyler Wotherspoon, Garnet Hathaway when he was here. We had a lot of different guys that we had in and out of that leadership group. Cody Roback is another guy. Colby Roback is another guy that was in it. So we had some really quality people that was a privilege for us to have a chance to work with.
You mentioned Garnet Hathaway, and really when you think back to the very first game of the season, your team lost their entire top line at one point in time. All three of them in Hathaway, Janko, and Mange were all playing up with the Calgary Flames. Obviously, great for development, but for you guys, it was a bit of a blow, but it never seemed to be. It seemed like it was just always another opportunity, regardless on who was playing with Mange, and then you got Spencer and Brett going really kind of midway through the season, and it seemed like there was a new hero almost every night after you lost a line that I'm sure you would have loved to have had all season long.
Oh, sure we would have. There's no doubt about that. But that's what it's all about. Players get opportunity, and then it becomes up to them what they do with that opportunity. And I think we had some guys this year that made good with that. They seized that opportunity that was in front of them. Spencer got off to a little bit of a slower start. You mentioned we lost some key guys that were generating offense for us. Well, it put a little bit more pressure on him, and he found a way to be a 20-goal scorer with the bulk of his goals coming after Christmas. I've talked about Brett already, but there was a lot of guys in those situations that raised their level. Morgan Klimchuk was another guy that 19 goals again for a second year in a row. So we did have people that raised their level when called upon, and I think that's a great sign for our group in general. And I at times I think you can go further down the line. Two young guys that we had that played part of the year in KC, and McMurtry and Nowick played very well for us down the stretch and were really important contributors to our team.
McMurtry was one I was going to ask you about, because when you look at the second half of the campaign and really the last couple of weeks, I think he's been one of those guys that's really raised his level up to get you to a point where you were playing meaningful hockey in the last game of the year. So when you have a guy like that who is coming off of his first AHL deal in Texas, played a little bit of ECHL now, both of his first two seasons, but really sees that opportunity, and as you said before, you want to see guys raise their level when it matters most, and he was one of those guys that certainly did.
He did. And what we like about him is we challenged him a few times, and every time we challenged him, he found a way to answer it. By the end of the year, I guess we used him in a top two centerman role in every situation but penalty kill. He was a guy we used on offensive faceoffs. He was used on our power play. We expected him to generate 5-on-5, and he did that for us. So we're very proud of what he was able to do coming in, and not just stepping in and filling a hole in our lineup. He came in and contributed, and that's what you expect all your players to do. Feel that they have value no matter what the situation is, and they put their best foot forward, and I most definitely believe Mike did that for us this year.
Yeah, the other guy to me that comes to mind as one of those guys who really stepped up at the tail end of the year was Emile Poirier, and he was maybe a bit of a message sent after the Manitoba game where Poirier just didn't seem to be bringing that same effort that you needed. He sat for a couple games and then came back with a real renewed focus, and for a guy who obviously last year missed a lot of hockey to get into a position where when it mattered most, he was one of those guys that elevated his game.
He did, and I think when you look at Emile's situation, he made a lot of changes in his life over this past year and a half, I guess you can say. He's gone through a lot of things, that you don't want to see a young man have to go through, but we felt like he's come through it really in a positive way, and I think he's a stronger guy for it, but his play on the ice was inconsistent, almost a little bit to be expected, but I think there's times when instead of feeling sorry for yourself if things aren't going your way, you have to dig in and play harder. And there were stretches where Emile wouldn't do that. But when we did end up scratching him those last two games, I think it lit a bit of a fire under him where it made him unhappy, mad, whatever you want to call it, where he came out and played to maybe more to our expectations and his expectations. So he, at the end of the year, was one of our more consistent players, and it was simply because he was using his speed. He was making it difficult for defensemen to play against, and he was forcing them into mistakes a lot. And that's what we need from him moving forward. He needs to find a way to continue to be that consistent way without taking his foot off the gas, which led us to take him out of the lineup a couple times. So the way he finished the year, we're really pleased with. There was a lot of real positive things about his game, and hopefully that's something that he can continue with and feel good about going into the summer.
I think one thing for you guys maybe to feel really good about when you look at the last couple of years, the road record has been one that hasn't been very positive, but this year it was. In fact, it's a better record for you guys away from Stockton Arena than it was inside Stockton Arena for the first time. What do you attribute the success to, being on the road and getting a few more wins than you had in the past?
I think there's a few things. One, your leadership group. We've talked about them already, but if the team isn't ready to play when you're on the road, you don't stand a chance in most buildings. And I think, too, more often than not, we played, I don't want to say a smarter game on the road, but we didn't cause so many problems for ourselves, which allowed our opponent to get themselves back into a game. So we were simple with our decisions with the puck. I thought we were competitive on the road, and we played with edge, which when our team was having success, we were always edgy. And I think those would be probably the two biggest differences as to why our road record was better this year.
Looking to the future now, when you see some of these guys that have come in at the tail end of the year and guys that are going to have back, the identity for our team really has not changed over the course of time. And when you start to see who may be coming here in Stockton, who's going to be here, do you see any kind of significant change, or do you feel like the way that you guys approach the game the last couple of years is going to be the way that you're going to continue to approach the game next year?
Well, there's always changes. I think when you don't have the success you want, you look for different ways where you can find a way to get a few more wins. And I think the speed that our team plays the game at, I think we can improve that. That's something that we'll look to continue to develop and push as we head or as we move forward. I think our team always has to be gritty and edgy. When we forecheck the right way, when we play in teams in the face of our opponent, we're a more effective team because I feel like we're miserable to play against. And that's really when people leave our building or when we leave a rink on the road, you want them to think, man, I hate playing that team. And I think for the most part, that's kind of ingrained in us a little bit, and that's something that we have to continue to develop as we move forward. But I think over the last couple of years here, we've made a step in the right direction with our culture in regards to how we want to be around here. I do believe the guys enjoy coming to the rink here in Stockton. I believe that they really enjoy playing hard for each other, and that's something that I think is important as we continue to look forward and improve as we head down the road.
That style was one that I think when the team first moved here from Glens Falls, Brian Burke came and said that they want to take this identity. It's a tough, hard to play against team, and it's kind of indicative of the city you play in Stockton. And we saw obviously at the very end of the year when this building's full, there's a lot of energy, and there were 8,000 fans that were cheering you guys on to try and get that extra goal you needed, and there were some big occasions where they came out this year. Is still obviously some work to do in the front office, but you enjoy watching playing in front of these fans and watching them come on the road into San Jose and other buildings and supporting you guys?
Yeah, we have a core group of fans in particular. I think the 99.9% of them are 365 members, and they're there all the time. And it most definitely doesn't go unrecognized, and our players are thankful for their support. But there are certain nights in this building where there's a lot of energy and a lot of positive environment, or I guess exciting environment, where there's situations where the building's almost full and the team feels that energy in here. There's a few nights in particular. Our last game that we played, the crowd was amazing. We had that band in here on a Saturday night, which maybe was the best atmosphere I've been a part of in the American League since I've coached here. It was just ridiculously good. And then, of course, you have your teddy bear toss, your Star Wars nights, things like that. But when there are a number of people in this building, it becomes very intimidating to play in. And when you factor the way our team has to play all the time with that edge and making sure we're making it uncomfortable on our opponents, it becomes a challenging place to come into, which is what we're trying to make sure we're able to do a little bit more of in the future.
The fact of the matter when it comes to the guys that you did send up to Calgary, especially early on, they were significant contributors to the Flames. You look at Mark Jankowski spent basically the entire season there. David Riddick spent a lot of time there. Brett Kulak, a member of the team last year, he was there the entire year. So you had a lot of guys that were real contributors from the Stockton Heat, whether it be the last 2 seasons or so. Is that the kind of message that the Flames organization wants to kind of portray, that you do your job here and you work hard in Stockton, you could have an opportunity to make your impression felt here at the Flames?
Well, in today's day and age, you have to develop from within. And I think everybody wants to snap their fingers and see things happen right now where guys are going up and they're contributing. But the reality of it is it takes some time. But as I mentioned, with our culture over the last couple of years is starting to improve. I think you're seeing that with some of our players in regards to how they can play the game and their expectation that they have of themselves, that they can go up and help Calgary play and help them have success. So it's all getting better for us in that regard down here, and it's something that we have to continue to push because Calgary needs these guys. They need the push from below. They need to create that competition, and when you have guys that are not just one or two guys, like handfuls of guys that are really pushing and getting very close to playing, I think it creates a lot of competition, not only for our group, but for the big team in Calgary.
Well, there are a couple guys that your staff determined were some of the best players for your team over the course of the year. The MVP and Offensive Player of the Year you guys named as Andrew Mangiapane, the Defensive Player of the Year Rasmus Andersson, Rookie of the Year Spencer Fu. Guys that there are certainly some other guys there that are ready to make the jump to the National Hockey League here soon. So when you look at guys that are going to be having a big summer and looking to try and push for a full-time job in Calgary, are there guys that you expect to not be around or that you're already kind of thinking to yourself, boy, I'm planning this guy not going to be here?
I don't know. It's we hope all of those guys, all of the guys that we've had, especially the young guys, we hope they're not back here. I mean, that's ultimately what our job is, to make sure they're in a position where they can go and have some success in Calgary and really push people out of jobs up there. The reality of it is some are going to be back, and it's what they do with or it's their attitude that really matters in regards to what they do when they come back down here that really matters, and will probably determine how long they're going to be here for. So if they come back down after camp, if they don't have success like the way they want, they need to come down here the way Mark came down here last year, ready to continue to prove himself, to keep showing people, put himself in a situation where he has a lot of success so he can get right back up there. So I think we're in a good spot. I think there's a lot of our younger guys that are close now, closer than they have been before, and hopefully with a good summer of work, they're going to put themselves in a position where at least they're going to be in conversations for a long period of time.
You mentioned a couple memories that you have over the season, Teddy Bear Toss, the Pittman Band, which is one of my favorites as well. But when you look back at the entire season as a whole, is there anything that you're going to remember most from this year?
Oh, it's a tough one. I don't know. There's a lot of positives for me that you can take out of this. I think just the way our group, for maybe the one thing of the groups and teams that I've been around, this group came to work every day. And I know a lot of coaches will talk about they come to work every day and they practice as hard as they can. This one actually really did all the time. There was no in between. There was no going through the motions with them. If we were on the ice, they did it to the best of their ability. And when you have a group that is that way, you're going to develop more guys with probably some greater qualities, and they're going to help you win down the road. So that was the one thing with this group. There was never a day where I was worried about their work ethic or I thought they were going to take the day off. They came to work every day, and that's something that we're really proud of.